life by ourselves, we sing that song sometimes, there's nothing worse than being alone. And that's true, I think. Gavin Lighting got me on a show recently. I don't know if you've watched it. I still haven't watched it. When I say got me on a show, like it's filed in there, like I think I'll watch this at some point in the future. But I haven't yet. But it seems cool where on the History Channel they take people that want to see how long they can survive by themselves with the promise of getting $500,000 at the end if you last the longest. And you get to take a few things with you, but very mild, and they drop you off, and then you just tell them when you want to come home. And so on the surface, you think like, hey, this is going to be fine. It's the way God made Adam and Eve, and you just go live off the land, and that seems to be something that you could do for a while. But I think from what I read about the show, it doesn't last that long. People don't last that long. You realize real quick that you're pretty comfortable being surrounded by everybody, and being alone is not what it's cracked up to be. And yet, here we are on the cusp of the time of year where everybody is going back to school. And those of you who have turned 18 and are embarking on the journey known as college, look at this word and you say to yourself, I want nothing more than that. And to be on my own and finally get to be who I need to be, who I want to be. I've been encumbered by and brought down by all the shackles of childhood, and now as a man or a woman, I'm going to be able to finally spread my wings and fly. I'm going to tell you that God recognizes this, God acknowledges this, that there is a time for you to grow and to blossom into adulthood, and it's time for many of us, many of our children, to go on to that great unknown where you are going to be on your own. And I wanted to take the opportunity before many of you leave for the semester to talk about some wisdom the Bible has for young adults in just this particular situation. I appreciate Andrew reading from Proverbs, even though it wasn't necessarily connected with this lesson. But Proverbs is such an interesting book. It's a book geared for wisdom, built on wisdom, with the idea of sharing wisdom to other generations. And specifically, what we'll look at this morning is wisdom given from a father to a son. That's how it's couched. It's not, hey, it's general wisdom for everybody. It's like, hey, I've learned a few things in my life, and I'd like to share those with you. And so there's a need in which all of us can benefit from the wisdom of Proverbs, but a special need, I think, for those who are young, ready to embark on their own journey to gain the wisdom that God so desperately wants you to have. So this morning the goal is simple. We've got 5 points that should be pretty quick that will talk about wisdom for young adults in ways in which I hope the Bible can help you navigate this time in your life that is both full of promise and possibility, but also potential for problems. And I want you equipped to deal with that appropriately. Here's my goal. I think as a minister, you are keenly aware of your impact on people, especially children that have kind of grown up in the congregation where you worship. And so, don't make me lose sleep with your bad decisions. I don't want that. I don't want that for your family. I don't want that for me. I don't want that for you. And so, while you are going to be on your own, let me equip you to do that with some things that God would have you say. And I hope our study together this morning is profitable. Well, number one, I ask you to turn to Proverbs chapter 2. And this is my first point from these verses. He says, for the Lord gives wisdom. From his mouth come knowledge and understanding. And in verse 1 he says, my son, if you will receive my words and treasure my commandments within you. Notice what he says, my son, if you will receive my words. My son, in verse 1 of chapter 3, my son, do not forget my teaching, but let your heart keep my commandments. Chapter 4, verse 1, hear, O sons, the instruction of a father, and give attention that you may gain understanding. For I give you sound teaching, and do not abandon my instruction. And when I was a son to my father, tender and the only son in the sight of my mother, then he taught me and said to me, keep your heart, hold fast my words, keep your commandments, and live. Over and over, he says in these first few chapters, hear, my son, your father's instruction, and forsake not your mother's teaching, for they are a graceful garland for your head and pendants for your neck. Over and over, we are encouraged to not forget the things our parents told us. Oh, it's so hard, isn't it? Especially as a young person, when you start to grow up and mature, you think to yourself, well, my parents don't really know everything. Now, when you're younger, you think, my parents know everything. And then you start to get a little older and you realize, well, my parents don't know everything, but they still know a lot. Then you get a little bigger and you think, well, my dad's still stronger than me, but I'm pretty strong too. And then you get to the point where, no, I'm definitely stronger than my dad. I'm definitely bigger than my dad. I'm faster than my dad. And all those things that come along with it is, I know more than my dad. He can't program the TV. He can't do all these things. And the kids somehow surpass the parents in a lot of ways. And that leads us to a false reality in our mind that think, hey, my parents don't really have anything to offer me. They've done a good job. I appreciate them. They're nice. We have a good relationship. But outside of buying me meals, I have really no need for my parents. And that fallacy should be blown up by the first few chapters of Proverbs, where the writer is desperate for children not to forsake the teaching of their parents, not to forsake the wisdom of their parents, a father's instruction, your mother's teaching. And I think predicated on this is the idea and the expectation that those are godly teachings. If your parents aren't acting like Christians and they don't know God and they're the heathen of heathens, then yeah, this is not ideal and this doesn't apply in that sense. But the expectation here is that your parents have been faithful to follow God, they've embraced God's teaching, and they've tried to share that with you. And so over the years, while you may have kicked against that, you may have rebelled against, why can't I do this, why can't I wear that, why can't I go here, why can't I watch this, all these type things you kind of push back on, the writer here still comes back to, your parents have something to offer. Your parents have something that is worth holding on to. And so I don't want you to think when you're out on your own that the first thing you're going to do is never talk to your family again or never listen to what your mom and dad have to say. That's not the idea. It's not the idea once I turn 18, I don't have to listen to you. That's what silly people say. And the older you get, and it's funny, because at 18 you think that's true, but at 28 you're like, oh hey, how do you solder this thing again? And what was wrong with this, and how do I fix it? And you talk to your mom about, hey, how did you cook that again? But somehow between 18 and 28, you forget all that. But it's such a prime time for you to realize that your parents have learned a great deal of both spiritual wisdom, practical wisdom, and all those sorts of things, where the writer here just continues almost in every chapter and every verse saying, I don't want you to forget the things that your parents have told you. And so while you're going to hear other influences and other ideas from both teachers and friends, remember these verses where your parents are desperate for you to remember the things that you've been given. I'll say this as we end. As a parent, this is our job, to equip you to be able to handle the next phase of life. We know you're going to be on your own. We want you to be on your own. And yet, we have been spending years and years not just keeping you alive, but infusing the things that we've learned, the pitfalls that we've stumbled into, we're trying to keep you out of, and we're trying to put you on the good, solid path. And so appreciate that wisdom for what it is, and hold fast to those things. All right, more formally then, over the next 4 points, I got some details about things that I really want you to focus on. Number one, it's so important for you to choose good friends. It's so important for you to choose good friends. Almost the foil to wisdom in these first few chapters is how people that are unwise are going to try to lead you astray. And so in chapter 1, and this is almost in every chapter, he says in verse 8, and I have verse 6 on the other slides, not to forsake your father's instruction, because in verse 10, sinners may entice you. And they say, come with us and let us lie in wait for blood, Let us ambush the innocent without cause. Let us swallow them alive like Sheol, even whole as those who go down to the pit. We will find all kinds of precious wealth. We will fill our houses with spoil. Throw in your lot with us. We shall all have one purse. My son, do not walk in the way with them, and keep your feet from their path. For their feet run to evil, and they hasten to shed blood. Now, you may read those verses, especially as a young person, and say, well, I'd never do that. I mean, those people are crazy. You know, I don't have any friends, and I'm not going to meet any friends that are going to say, let's go lie and wait to kill someone. Today, this is what we're going to do. I got an idea. Let's go carjack someone and just kill the entire family. You know, you're probably not at risk of running into people like that just out on the street or in college. Now, that happens sometimes. But the reality that was just as true back then is just as true today. Your friends are going to entice you and have a very real influence over you. Now, notice what we're reading in these verses. Is there anything that stuck out to you? The person that's bent on doing evil doesn't want to do evil alone. They don't want to do evil by themselves. For some reason, they're interested with you. They want to share with you. Hey, I got an idea. Let's all go do this. And evil has a way of wanting to drum up as many people to follow in that path of foolishness. And the reality is, like, I get it. As a college kid, youth is a time for stupidity. Now, I dare you to go ask your parents, hey, tell me the dumbest thing you did in college. And for them to say, I never did anything. I was always at church, or I was in the library, or I was studying at home, and I never got into any trouble. I got into trouble. I never got into trouble. But I should have been in trouble for some of the things I did. I mean, probably the dumbest thing was throwing bowling balls out of a moving vehicle to try to knock down trash cans. That was not a good idea. We hit a police car one time and just drove on. No one's looking for it. Just comes out of nowhere. But the reality is, while youth is a time for stupidity, you still have to deal with the consequences. And that's what the writer talks about. He's like, look, evil's going to sound good. We're going to make a lot of money. We're going to share things. We're going to take advantage of people. But notice what it says in verse 18 of Proverbs 1. They lie in wait for their own blood. They ambush their own lives. Now, who would ever do that? Hey, let's go kill ourselves. Well, we're not going to do that. Let's go rob ourselves. Well, that doesn't make any sense. But that's how doing evil ends up. You think it's going to have a different set of consequences than it does. And yet, when you do evil, there are punishments. And you're going to end up paying the consequences for that. And I'm going to tell you, you are going to be so influenced by your friends that you almost will not do good things if your friends aren't doing good things. I'll give you another example. So I had some friends when I was in school, and they came up with the idea one night that we're going to make drinks for each other. And there's nothing alcoholic, but it was whatever's in the fridge, and then you have to drink it. And the person that doesn't throw up wins. And so, I mean, just imagine like pickle juice and horseradish and mustard and milk. And then you just are handed it and you have to drink it. And so, you've got, again, doesn't that sound like the dumbest thing you could ever do? But this is what people do. That they sit around and they do this. And your friends are going to hand this to you, and you're going to say one of two things. Okay, we'll see what I can do. Or you're going to be like me and say, even at my young age, there's something stupid about this that I don't think I can do. Like, I lose. I lose automatically. But you're going to do stuff. And just recognize the power your friends are going to have to entice you to do things that don't make any sense. Number two, and this is the reality, you are either going to be lifted up and encouraged by those people you choose to associate with. You're going to be a better version of yourself. They're going to bring out the best in you, or you're going to be drugged down by them. I mean, we don't have it on the board. You probably think we're going to mention it. I mean, it's a good verse. We always mention 1 Corinthians 15:33. Evil companions corrupt good morals. Don't be deceived. You're going to be corrupted negatively by the influence of the people you associate with. It just is going to happen. And I can't think of anything a parent wants more than good friends for their children. And so when I talk about good friends, this is what I mean. Friends that are going to go to church. Friends that love Jesus. Friends that want to do the right thing. Friends that don't want to do the bad things. Friends that have a conscience. Friends that have integrity. Friends of character. That's the kind of people you want. But too often, we end up with friends because, hey, we all like the same games. Or we do the same things. Or we like to go on hikes and, it's fun. And aside from just friends, let me touch on relationships for a minute. When you have a relationship with a boyfriend or a girlfriend and you're in college and you're finding out who you want to marry, all of a sudden you may find that you have some good qualities, but you got a whole lot of bad qualities. And a lot of times we'll put up with the bad qualities if we like to have fun and they're really attractive and we get along together. And they might not be who my parents want me to bring home, and they might not be the kind of person I need to be, and maybe they get angry sometimes and there's some other problems. Let me tell you, your life is going to be defined by people you associate with more often than not. And the best thing you can do if you find yourself in a bad friendship or a bad relationship is to say, I just got to walk out of this. I got to stop it. I got to end it. Now, is that ever easy? Of course it's not easy. Is it easy to say, I can't hang out with you anymore? Is it easy to not answer somebody's calls or respond to their texts? No, it's not easy. But it is literally the best thing you can do for yourself if you find yourself, I thought you were good and you were really bad. You just can't stay in it. You can't rise above the friends that you choose in college more often than not. Number two, Number one was listen to the things your parents taught you. Number three, and this is especially true for youth, avoid sexual sin. If you read the first part of Proverbs, the first 6 chapters, where it's more thematic about general wisdom and truths associated with it, almost every chapter deals with, in some way, sexual sins. There's this woman out there that is trying to entice this simpleton, this guy who doesn't have any sense, and he's going to be led astray to go down this path of destruction. And in college, this is just part of the course, right? This is sowing your wild oats. This is just being normal. And yet, the Bible warns us, you want to talk about wisdom, avoid sexual temptation. He says in verse 20, why should you, my son, be exhilarated with an adulteress and embrace the bosom of a foreigner? For the ways of a man are before the eyes of the Lord, and he watches all his paths. I want you to think about those verses for just a minute. God warns us against committing sexual sin over and over again. And this is not a Proverbs thing. It's not just an Old Testament thing. It's a New Testament. It's everywhere. And God created sexuality and relationships to be a blessing and a wonderful thing. This is not some negative thing that God, is taboo from God's perspective. God says it's honorable, but only in the boundaries in which God has set them. And so God says, here's what I want you to do. I want you to get married, and in that relationship, there's nothing defiled. The marriage bed is undefiled. Fornicators and adulterers, God is going to judge. And that's kind of what he's saying here in Proverbs. Like, why should you follow after and be intoxicated by this forbidden woman? And he gives us this great warning. A man's ways are before the eyes of the Lord. So, I don't want you to think just because you're on your own and nobody's around and finally you're underneath, your parents no longer, that you have no accountability. The accountability is still there. God is always watching the actions of men. Like, God is pondering your past. So while you're pondering your past, God is pondering your ponderings. God sees your heart. God sees your ways. God knows what's going on. And so just because you leave the nest, you're not leaving God. You can't leave that expectation that God is going to hold us accountable for the things that we've done. Now, number two, and here's the scary reality, Satan will use this weakness of you to cause us to sin. That's what Satan does. Some things we don't have a problem with. If I ask young people, are you struggling, guys, with laundering money? White-collar crime, is this something that we're really dealing with? Talk about from the pulpit every once in a while, cheating on your taxes. They're not sitting there thinking about that. Let me tell you what they're sitting there thinking about. I don't know what they're thinking. Everybody needs me to tell them what they're thinking. No, with you, you're thinking about somebody that's pretty sitting next to you, somebody that's handsome sitting over there, right? That's some of the perils of youth. And that's why Paul tells Timothy, flee youthful lusts. There are some things that are unique to younger people that we got to be extra careful with. And God wants you to run from those and run in the other direction. And now you're saying, well, of course, the preacher's going to say this. Let me tell you, this is God saying this. There is wisdom in here. Because let me tell you where this path leads of unbridled, unrestrained sexuality. Problems. Problems beyond pregnancy, problems beyond disease, problems with intimacy, emotional connection, all sorts of problems of trust. I can't even articulate all the problems that people get into because they don't follow God's rules on this thing. And yet you think when you're young, it's like, hey, this is okay, I can dabble in these things left and right. Let me tell you what God says. You're going to be drugged down. Verse 23 of chapter 5. He will die for lack of instruction. And in the greatness of his folly will he go astray. The verse prior. His own iniquities will capture the wicked. And he will be held with the cords of his sin. When you commit sexual sin, it's like you're tying the noose around your own neck and saying, yeah, this is a great idea. I know it's difficult. And we can talk more about Genesis and Joseph and his integrity, but I just throw this out here for you. It's going to take integrity away from home and on your own to continue to have a love for God and to pursue purity. It's just going to be something that has to come from here. It can't come from a fear of getting caught. It can't come from the preacher coming down on you. It can't come from you being afraid of shame. When you're on your own and you're alone, you're going to have every opportunity. And only a man or woman of integrity can be who they need to be in the face of temptation. But God can help you with this. But I want you to avoid these sexual sins. That's what the wisdom of Proverbs says. All right, number 4. I also want for you to become an adult. To become an adult. Now you may say, well, I'm wanting to become an adult. I can get behind this point. This is great. I've been wanting to be an adult for a long time. But notice what Paul says in 1 Corinthians 13. When I was a child, I used to speak like a child, think like a child, reason like a child. But when I became a man, I did away with childish things. Now, this is in the context of love, which happens to be in the context of spiritual gifts, which is all about how to, get away from problems in the church and dealing with problems that cropped up by spiritual gifts. And love is the more excellent way. And with love, I can be the kind of person I need to be in the church, but it takes maturity. And that's what Paul's saying. Finally, I just put away childish things when I became a man. Let me share this with you, young people. You can't become a man until you put away the childish things. Now, before I go headlong into this, let me acknowledge that youth is a time to enjoy life. In Ecclesiastes, if you want to turn over there, it's a great text that talks about this reality. Sometimes you can come across real hardcore and forget that youth is a time for fun. Rejoice, O man, he says in verse 9, during your childhood, and let your heart be pleasant during the days of young manhood. And follow the impulses of your heart and the desires of your eyes, yet know that God will bring you to judgment for all these things. So remove grief and anger from your heart, and put away pain from your body, because childhood and the prime of life are fleeting. I think in general, youth is a time for enjoyment. Even God acknowledges this. There's going to be a time, he says in chapter 12 of Ecclesiastes, when life's not going to be too enjoyable. I was joking with Wallace in the back about health problems, and we're talking about things that are hurting and all that stuff. It's like getting old is not for the faint of heart. Getting old is not easy. And you look back and you see a 20-year-old playing and going to the beach, it's like, you should never complain about anything when you're 20. You can go do and you can have fun and you got nothing wrong, you're going out here. But 20-year-olds, they can still act like the world has full of problems and they're upset, emotional, all these things. Youth is a time to enjoy life. Put away sorrow from you. Put away those things. But yet, no, God's going to bring us into judgment and hold us accountable. But what does Paul mean, I think, when I became a man? What I think we want to see from children is an opportunity for you to grow up and to be the kind of person that you need to be. Which is what? It's a man or a woman. It's an adult. It's to be mature. And a lot of times when you leave home, you still carry with you the baggage of childhood, but you don't yet take on the mantle of maturity, of adulthood. Remember what Paul said in 2 Thessalonians? We won't read it for time's sake. Paul was talking to Thessalonians about people that do nothing with their lives, busybodies, lazy, people that aren't living how they ought to live. And Paul said, hey, remember when I was there? I took care of myself. I worked hard to provide for my needs. Let me tell you what becoming an adult is all about. Being able to take care of yourself and others. That's the number one thing that separates a child from an adult. A child cannot take care of themselves, and an adult has to do it. And there are too many people that grow up and still keep on the childish things. Here's what childish things are. Right, I don't work. I'm not profitable. I don't take care of myself. I'm looking for others to do for me. I'm just, moving from one meal to the next, trying to just have a good time, letting other things get in the way, going back to being a child. Let me tell you what's not fun. 25-year-old children. 30-year-old children. 35-year-old children. People that continue to not be a man in their home, raise their families. They can't do the things that a man needs to do because they still have too much time spent playing games, goofing off, doing things. Right? That's what kids do. Mature men, like Paul, are going to work and do what's necessary to take care of themselves and for other people. So here's what I encourage you. Don't look at college as an opportunity to just continue to do nothing in a more grand way. It's an opportunity to grow and take care of other people. I was talking this morning to Roman about going down to church, going down to Florida College, and he said, hey, one of the things I'm going to do, I'm going to find a place where I can go worship, where I can help. It's a great attitude. Right? To this reason we were called, 1 Peter 3 says, to be a blessing. We received a blessing so that we can be a blessing to other people. And if your life is not a blessing to others, then shame on us. Sometimes, and again, we can be guilty of it, college kids are just given a free pass for everything. Oh, you're in college? Y'all just come over and eat. Don't worry about eating. Now, I remember what it was like being down in college, being a college kid. They love college kids. We were all the college kids. What do they expect from college kids? Nothing. You just come here and you're just eating, have a good time. We're just glad you're around. I don't want a bunch of kids that are just around. I got enough of those. I want people that are there, that are helping, that are blessings. And look, if you are there as a young person to help and to serve and to bless others, then you're becoming like the Savior. Then you're maturing in the ways you need to mature, and then everybody's going to want you around. But at some point, you're just a too big kid. And none of that is honoring God or honoring who you intend or need to be. It is time for you, if you want to be on your own, to take care of yourself, to take care of others. And then finally, learn something while you're off at school that is really valuable. Learn something valuable. The first chapters of Proverbs are all about wisdom. It's all about wisdom. The whole book's about wisdom, but especially the first few chapters. Blessed is the one who finds wisdom and the one who gets understanding. For the gain from her is better than gain from silver, and her profit better than gold. I want you to think about this reality for just a second. Why are you going to school in the first place? This is a good question. Are we going to get an education so that with an education, I'm able to make some silver and gold? I'm able to make some profit? And maybe some of you will go on to be extremely successful from the world's perspective. Maybe you're going to go to med school. Maybe you're going to be a doctor. Maybe you're going to be some kind of lawyer. I don't know what your goal is, but you might be somebody that is in the upper tier of profitability from an education perspective. All those things, right, are good from the world's perspective. Let me tell you what the Bible says. Something that is better than as much money as you could possibly make in this life. And that is learning something real. It's wisdom. Having wisdom. And wisdom is something that God puts a premium on above anything else. And it's something that you can learn here at home. It's something you've been learning. It's something you can learn today and tomorrow and continue to learn for the rest of your life. But it's something that the world is going to scoff at. You know, from a Christian's perspective, we have found and have seen the most valuable thing we can find. What's real? Something beyond the temporary, the tangible, something that is eternal and lasting and real. Not just this mirage of what we see in front of us. And here in 1 Corinthians, he says, let me tell you how that wisdom is going to appear to the world. It's going to appear like foolishness. When you talk to the world about, hey, the most important thing in my life is my relationship to God, well, that looks like foolishness. He says in verse 25, the foolishness of God is wiser than men, and the weakness of God is stronger than men. For consider your calling, brethren. Not many were wise, according to the flesh. Not meaning mighty, not meaning noble. But God has chosen the foolish things of the world to shame the wise. And God has chosen the weak things of the world to shame those who are strong. Let me say this about school. All the things that you're going to go learn, anything that you put your mind to, any degree that you get, has only value in this life. That's it. And even that is for such a short period of time. Some of your more specialized skills, coding, technical things, you got to keep going to school. Keep getting recertified. Keep getting acknowledged that you know what you need to know. Let me tell you, you can pursue all those things and get an A+ and get a degree and still be the dumbest person in the eyes of God. And that's just the saddest thing. Because God has already equipped you to know everything you need to know without stepping foot in a classroom. That's just the reality. You don't have to go to school to be successful in the eyes of God. You don't ever have to learn a degree. You don't ever have to learn a trade and be more skilled than anybody else. You can work at McDonald's the rest of your life and be valuable in the eyes of God. I think that's very important for Christians to know and learn, because you're going to grow up and you're going to think, hey, if I don't do this, if I don't finish my degree, if I don't do this, my parents aren't going to be happy with me. And let me tell you, as a parent, if you are learning what matters, I'll be happy. I'll be happy. And if you never find success financially in this life, if you live check to check and you struggle for the rest of your life, but you're faithful to God, I'll be happy. And I want my kids to hear that. And I want you to hear that. But I don't want you to go to school and think, hey, I got straight A's and lost my faith, and that you learned anything. You lost the one thing that was valuable. All right, those are my lessons for you as we close this morning. I'll leave you with this verse. I was conscious as I was thinking about this. There's probably a lot of people that are not going to school, and they may have gone to school 3 or 4 years ago, and they may say, hey, well, it's kind of embarrassing because I did all the opposite things he was talking about. I went and made a mess of my life. I didn't do the right thing. I made all those mistakes you talked about. Here I am, just wondering what my future's going to hold. Let me tell you about God. He will take all those mistakes, like the prodigal son. He'll take your acknowledgement that I'm broke, I've got nothing, I'm living off nothing, but I finally see myself and the pleasure I pursued for what it is. And the prodigal son stood up and said to himself, people in my father's house are taken care of. I'm going to go to my father to acknowledge my sin. That's all God asks of you this morning. God asks of you to acknowledge what you've done against Him. God asks of you to say, hey, maybe I'll try to do things your way now and not my way. But God is not going to look at your failure and say, that excludes you from this. You could have made an F on every class. And if you come forward to get a degree from God, God will welcome you with open arms. That's what's different about the God we know and love through the Bible. If you're here this morning and you know your life's been full of mistakes, but you're ready to change and wipe those away, God will do it this morning. Whether through baptism, your confession, your public acknowledgement of your faith in Jesus, whatever it is, why don't you make your life right with Him as we stand and sing a song first.